Hey, what we doing? How we feeling? What's up, everyone? Everyone seems to be getting in on the stream pretty early as soon as I press live now, which is pretty good. So I'm glad people are on the ball to jump in straight away. It means I don't have to sit for ages waiting for people to file into the stream, which is good. So thank you. Hope everyone's doing all right. There's a lot of content to get through with this fucking Asylum bill thing, which you probably won't watch all of. But I'm going to kick off and get going. Whilst there are people in chat already, people watching the stream already, and there is questioning Suella Braverman around the new Asylum bill or her plans to tackle small boats, quote unquote. There's a lot of stuff to get through, so I'm just gonna get going.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement about the government's illegal migration bill. 2 months ago, the Prime Minister made a promise to the British people. He said that anyone entering this country illegally will be detained and swiftly removed. No half measures.
Again, straight off the bat, it's also worth just obviously prefacing everything that's happening here by saying that if someone is coming into the country illegally, it's because you've made it illegal, right? In those so far as the government could literally maintain that all migration was illegal and therefore migration would stop, and then it would still be justified under these same pretenses. Instead of having a discussion about what is illegal and what isn't, how about we have an actual discussion about the utility of the plans involved, right? That's far more interesting discussion as far as I'm concerned, making normative claims rather than descriptive ones.
The illegal migration bill will fulfil that promise. It will allow us to stop the boats that are bringing tens of thousands to our shores in flagrant breach of both our laws and the will of the British people.
And the sad thing is it probably won't even do that, right? It probably won't even actually stop the boats in it at all. Or what will happen is the people who arrive on the boats will try as hard as they can to ensure that they don't ever actually go through the asylum process and maintain their status as being completely illegal immigrants. Just undetected, right? Rather than actually going through the asylum process. And also, obviously, there's the whole breaking international law thing. Yeah.
Now, the United Kingdom must always support the world's most vulnerable. Since 2015...
So it's worth pointing out, if this bill goes through, right, that at this point, the only legal asylum claimants who will be able to come to the UK are people from Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Syria. That's it. No one else will have any legal routes at all to get to the country. None of them will get their asylum claims. They're all off to fucking Rwanda. Nobody. It's literally just those three countries. Everywhere else is whether you're from Yemen, whether you're from Ethiopia, whether you're from Iran, etc., etc. Tough shit, mate.
We've given sanctuary to nearly 500,000 people. These include 150,000 people from Hong Kong, 160,000 people from Ukraine, 25,000 Afghans fleeing the Taliban.
Oh, that's actually, I forgot about Hong Kong. Yeah, sue me.
Indeed, my own parents, Mr. Speaker, decades ago found security and opportunity in this country, something for which my family is eternally grateful. Crucially, these are decisions supported by the British people, precisely because they were decisions made by the British people and their elected representatives, not by the people smugglers and other criminals breaking into Britain on a daily basis. For a government not to respond to waves of illegal migrants breaching our borders...
It's super weird how this was never a problem, A, before leaving the European Union, and B, in a position where there was adequate funding for our asylum claims process so there wasn't a massive backlog.
Would be to betray the will of the people we were elected to serve. Now, the small boats problem...
It's also just incredibly triggering for them to continually say the will of the people, as if there was some kind of referendum around the issue of migrant crossings or whatever. I think there's some polling that I've seen where I think it's about somewhere between a 5 to 15 point lead for supporting things like this bill. But there's never been any actual, democratic vote on this subject in particular, because we've not had an election since the small boat crisis started. So you can't even say that on a representative democratic basis. And your opinion polls, whilst they are a good whilst they are a good barometer of public support, they are not quote unquote the will of the people, because there's been no actual democratic mandate for any of this stuff. You're right, do okay, doing. And even then, those legal routes are extremely poorly managed. You would argue on purpose. Well, yeah, almost, absolutely, 100%, 100%.
Is part of a larger global migration crisis. In the coming years, developed countries will face unprecedented levels, with pressures from ever greater numbers of people leaving the developing world for places like the United Kingdom.
I wonder why that might be, Swella. Do you have a rough idea of why they might be leaving those places in the world? No, no possible. It's just a thing that happened completely by accident. It's definitely nothing to do with imperial pipelines and the difference in levels of the wealth inequality between the global north and the global south, and the oncoming issue of climate change and how that's going to affect countries in the global south and leave us with climate refugees. Right? Is that not? Is that not? Do you don't want to apportion any of the blame to this, to the failures of the global north, right? As I said, if you really don't want immigrants to come here, how about you stop doing interventionist wars, you break apart the imperial pipelines and comprador capitalism that is essentially the business model of the global north, and you start attacking and you start dealing with climate change. Those are the main. If you really want to stop immigration from the source, then make it so that the countries that they're leaving aren't completely destroyed by quote unquote interventions, whether they be economic or military interventions within their countries and within their spheres of influence.
Unless we act today, the problem will be worse tomorrow, and the problem is already unsustainable. Mr. Speaker, people are dying in the Channel. The volume of
your policies killed them. Right? You've killed them, Swella. That was your fault, right? You and your party literally deliberately has caused those deaths. And this bill that you're trying to push through is not going to stop them. I understand you're wanting to try and tug at people's heartstrings, but what anything is possible when you lie.
Illegal arrivals has overwhelmed our asylum system. The backlog has ballooned to...
No! The thing that's overwhelmed the asylum system is your lack of funding for the asylum system. Like, even though I disagree with some of the policies, the asylum policies that the new Labour government engaged in, at least the new Labour government, when they were trying to process asylum claims, gave them the funding they needed to be able to process double the number of asylum claims that we are seeing right now, right? Do I think they should have been more lenient in their asylum process? Absolutely. Do I think that David Blunkett should have been far less obscenely racist, because he was obscenely racist? So much obscenely racist to the point where he was doing like a choreographed song and dance with the Sun newspaper, where they were going to criticize him about illegal migration, and he was going to have some change of heart and then implement a new policy that was going to make New Labour popular. Like, that's how racist David Blunkett was, and they're still doing better than the Conservatives are right now on this kind of stuff, because even if they wanted to process the asylum claims, they can't, because they're under-resourced. Almost deliberately so, to try and, again, as I mentioned in my video about the Knowsley riots, to deliberately inflame people, and to stoke fears and racism within this country, and light the touch paper on far-right insurgencies, because they want to turn it into a political issue for clout. It's obscene. It's demonic. Given you're allowed to call a liar in Parliament, I'm guessing calling murderers doesn't fly either. True. Well, luckily I'm on YouTube, so I can do that. And you know what? She can join George Osborne and Heidi Allen and the whole entirety of the fucking Conservative Party, and large parts of the Labour Party as well. Right, Imagination Scene, how you doing?
Over 160,000. The asylum system now costs the British taxpayer £3 billion a year. Since 2018, some 85,000 people illegally entered the...
Well, it's a good thing, right, that would be a load cheaper if the actual asylum claims departments were larger and funded well enough, and we weren't having to spend loads of additional money on hotels and processing facilities, otherwise known as concentration camps, right? We're spending all of this money on hotels and concentration camps when we could just be spending it on having an asylum claims system that was adequately funded and adequately staffed, like it was during the slightly less demonic Blair years, but still pretty bad. All right, Ploppy, how you doing? And Imagination Scene, glad to see people in chat. Good to see you all.
United Kingdom by small boat, 45,000 of them in 2022 alone. All travelled through multiple safe countries in which they could and should have claimed asylum.
Why? They don't have to claim asylum in the first country as part of the Refugee Convention, although clearly, given that we have this bill in place already, that doesn't really matter. And also given the fact that we've given asylum claims to far fewer or housed fewer refugees than plenty of these other countries, like literally factors of 10 fewer than, places like Jordan, places like Turkey, even and less than basically every other country in Europe that of a similar size as well. Yeah, exactly. The absolute gall to complain about the price when they added huge amounts of money on top. Wasn't it? I thought it was £250 million for the Rwanda scheme. Not what I thought it was more than 130 million JDM. But still, regardless, a lot of money was spent on Rwanda. I think that is the vote. I think the votes this evening, isn't it? Imagination scene.
Many came from safe countries like Albania. Almost all passed through France. The vast majority, 74% in 2021, were adult males under the age of 40, rich enough to pay criminal gangs thousands of pounds for passage. Upon arrival,
I love how, again, people on the right are just so they were mad. They were absolutely mad about the kind of rhetoric that you were getting from feminists about men, right? Tangent time, I guess. How and so many conservatives were bought into the kind of the men's rights kind of shtick back 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was. And now they're all just like, well, actually, no, fuck men. Men can go. Men cannot be refugees. Men can't be asylum seekers. Men should just stay and fight in their own countries. Doesn't matter whether it's Syria or whether it's Ukraine or whether it's Yemen or whatever it is. Men, we do not want to give them any kind of protection. Right? They cannot be as they must be highly regarded, or they should be regarded with high levels of skepticism and suspicion for being a man claiming asylum. I'm sorry, are men just immune to the troubles of refugee status now? Like, it's this unironic misandry.
Most are accommodated in hotels across the country, costing the British taxpayer around...
That's your choice! You chose to put them in hotels because you didn't fund the asylum system properly. That's literally a thing that you chose to do.
£6 million a day. The risk remains that these individuals just disappear. And when we try to remove them, they turn our generous asylum laws against us to prevent removal. The need for reform is obvious and is urgent. This government has not sat on its hands, Mr. Speaker. Since this Prime Minister took office, recognising the necessity of joint solutions with France, we've signed a new deal providing more technology and embedding British officers with French patrols. And I hope Friday's Anglo-French summit will further deepen that cooperation. We've created a new small boats operational command with over 700 new staff. We've doubled NCA funding to tackle the smuggling gangs. We've increased enforcement rates.
See, again, even more money, even more of the quote-unquote taxpayers' money being shelled out to try and police the gangs to be able to fund the NCA or whatever it might be. Loads of more taxpayers' money that you claim to care so much about, except when it's housing, except when it's your choice to put asylum seekers in hotels, or your choice to fly them off to Rwanda, or your choice to fund the NCA to try and break the backs of the gangs. All that could be solved far cheaper by having a properly funded asylum system, asylum claims system, and B, by opening up legal routes. Right? Two very simple solutions that are cheaper for the taxpayer. But again, unfortunately, the only justification that you have for spending the money otherwise is because you're happy to play into the hands of and the ideology of racists. It's as simple as that. When you don't have any other possible justification for it. If you really, truly, genuinely wanted to frame this in the realm of what is financially sustainable, then you'd open up the fucking legal routes and make it cheaper already. Yeah, the only thing that is acceptable expenditure as far as rightoids are concerned is cops. The state cannot any amount of state expenditure is bad unless it's on cops. It's the only thing that's worth spending state money on.
By 50%. We've signed a deal with Albania, which has already enabled the return of hundreds of illegal arrivals. And we're procuring accommodation, including on military land, to end the farce of accommodating migrants in hotels. But let's be honest, it's still not enough. In the face of today's global migration crisis, Yesterday's laws are simply not fit for purpose. So to anyone proposing de facto open borders through unlimited safe and legal routes as the alternative, let's be honest, there are...
The legal route is how you'd be able to get to the UK to make the claim in the first place, right? Just because there's a legal route of access to the UK to make the asylum claim does not guarantee that you have your asylum claim accepted. I know that I'm going to piss off a bunch of leftoids in my chat by saying that I do not think that every asylum claim should be accepted and there should be a non-zero number of people who get deported, for example, right? But the scheme for deportation should not be anyone arriving by small boat because there is no legal route, and it shouldn't be straight off to fucking Rwanda. There should be deals reached between their places of origin when they come from safe countries where they shouldn't be getting, where their asylum claim shouldn't be accepted. But they can't get to the UK in the first place to be able to make the asylum claim for us to reject them if we don't give them the safe and legal routes and we make it illegal for them to come here by any other routes. It's very, very simple, right? There is a way of being able to do this without being like there is no choice. The choice isn't between breaking the refugee convention and completely open borders. There is a happy medium between the two. Amnesty International UK press release: government's anti-asylum bill is a shocking new low. I mean, they don't surprise me anymore. They really don't.
There are 100 million people around the world who could qualify for protection under our current laws. Let's be clear, they are coming here. We've seen a 500% increase in small boat crossings in 2 years. And this, Mr. Speaker, is the crucial point of this bill. They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed. Removed back to your country if it's safe, or to a safe country, a safe third country like Rwanda.
Literally, it's just wiping our hands of it. It's not my problem anymore, folks. Doesn't matter we've taken fewer refugees than loads of other countries of a similar size and like stratospherically fewer numbers than the ones actually already in the Middle East area, for example. No, it's like, fuck it. We don't want you contributing to our economy and bolstering our culture at anything like that, for example. We want to ship you off to fucking Rwanda at expense to the state rather than gain for the economy. It's not only is it racist, and not only is it obscenely immoral, but it's also economically inept. It's every single possible thing that you'd want to, there's no justification for any of this. It's all bad, right? From every possible angle. But what I would say is that I'm looking forward to the Labour Party responding this by only viewing it through the lens of economics and efficiency. I'm not going to call out how genuinely racist it is. The UK doesn't care about its responsibility to literally anyone. That's why we're happy to wash our hands of child grooming victim Shamima Begum. Don't care what people think about that case. You're 100% Ling Ling, you're absolutely right. And actually, it's kind of the same kind of it's almost kind of comes through the same kind of people, like the same right wing perspective towards Brexit, where it's just like we don't want to be friends with anybody else, right? We want to be selfish, we want to do our own thing, we want to shut ourselves off from the rest of the world, right? Incredibly petty, small-minded thinking. Yeah, they're not coming here. We accept far fewer refugees than the rest of Europe. You're 100%, JDM. You're absolutely correct.
And that is precisely what this bill will do. That is how we will stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, this bill enables detention of illegal arrivals without bail or judicial review within the first 28 days of detention until they can be removed. It puts a duty...
I mean, when you just start hearing things like without bail and judicial review, you know you're dealing with a totalitarian, authoritarian state, right? Where the people who they have claimed to be undesirables do not get the right to proper scrutiny under the law. They are laws unto themselves. I mean, I've called Suella Braverman a fascist before because she is just a fascist, right? This is fascism right now. Like, it not only is it like authoritarian policy in which people's human rights and adherence towards international law is being violated, but it's also being explicitly done through a nationalist and racist lens. Like, what is this other than fascism? Apparently someone from the Tony Blair Institute said the illegal migration bill is a soundbite dressed up as a solution and will ultimately join the Rwanda policy on the scrap heap. I mean, again, this is exactly the kind of things I would expect from the Labour right. The 100 million people coming here is exactly like when Farage just added the populations of Romania and Turkey. Was it Romania and Bulgaria? Oh, it was Romania and Turkey, you are right. And said that those people could come to the UK if those countries join the EU, yeah, literally. Again, the numbers don't lie, but people lie with numbers all the time.
On the Home Secretary to remove illegal entrants and will radically narrow the number of challenges and appeals that can suspend removal. Only those under 18, medically unfit to fly, or at a real risk of serious and irreversible harm, an exceedingly high bar in the country we are removing them to, will be able to delay their removal. Any other claims will be heard remotely after removal. And when our Modern Slavery Act passed, the impact assessment envisaged 3,500.
The way a government treats refugees is very instructive because it shows you how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. 100%, you know.
500 referrals a year. Last year, 17,000 referrals took on average 543 days to consider.
That was your fault. You did that. You did that. That's what austerity fucking gets you. A government that doesn't fucking function.
Laws are being abused to block removals.
You're right, commie scum. How you doing in chat?
That's why we granted more than 50% of asylum requests from citizens of a safe European country and NATO ally, Albania. That's why this bill disqualifies illegal entrants from using modern slavery rules to prevent removal. Mr. Speaker, I won't address the bill's full legal complexities today. Some of the nation's finest legal minds have been and continue to be involved in its development. But I must say this. Rule 39...
let's have a look at this one. Thanks for the link, Imagination Scene. Let me have a look. Without returns agreements in place, any new duty on the Home Secretary is meaningless, and the continued lack of any focus on enforcement against smuggling gangs. But it's just a Starmer line. It's just a Starmer line of where they just refuse to actually. Oh no, sorry. Actually, I lie. Okay, opening up and safe and viable routes for asylum claims. Okay, I mean, obviously they're still going on the digital identity verification stuff, which is nightmarish. But at least they're talking about safe and viable routes.
And the process
Right, folks, how are we doing?
The Strasbourg court to block, at the last minute, flights to Rwanda after our courts had refused injunctions was deeply flawed. Our ability to control our borders cannot be held back by an opaque process conducted late at night with no chance to make our case or even appeal decisions. That's why we've initiated discussions in Strasbourg to ensure their blocking orders meet a basic natural justice standard, one that prevents abuse of Rule 39s to thwart removal. And it's why the bill will set out the conditions for the UK's future compliance for such orders. Other countries share our dilemma and will understand the justice of our position. Our approach is robust and novel, which is why we can't make a definitive statement of compatibility under Section 19(1)(b) of the Human Rights Act. Of course,
I'm getting onto a different bias after we've covered the asylum bill stuff. Automated Hero. Braverman not tackling issues in Parliament, becoming an internal laughingstock in the House. Not surprising at all. I mean, everything she does is just like it's demented, yeah, and also evil as well.
Of course, the UK will always seek to uphold international law, and I am confident that this bill is compatible with international obligations. And when we stop the votes, Mr. Speaker, the bill will introduce an annual cap to be determined by Parliament on the number of refugees.
It's a point about exceedingly high bar before asylum seekers are in danger in Rwanda. The right wing point about people faking being LGBTQ to gain asylum. Almost certainly. I mean, as I said, you know, I will make this point again, considering that we're covering Rwanda and the asylum process and the Rwanda extradition deal as well, right? I will point this out yet again. The current Prime Minister of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, during the first Congo War, was head of the Rwandan military when it committed massacres, illegal war crime massacres against refugees in eastern Congo. Right? This man literally has a track record of being in control of armed forces that massacre refugees, and that's where we're sending refugees to. That is sick. It's sick. It's fucking sick. Absolutely sick. This is what the Daily Mail. This is literally how the kind of rhetoric that you get from how the Daily Mail treated Jewish people in the run up to the Second World War.
The UK will settle via safe and legal routes. This will ensure an orderly system, considering local authority capacity for housing, public services and support. So
any Tory coming to us and saying, what about the capacity for local authority housing? And I'm like, yeah, funny about that. It should almost like we shouldn't have sold them all off and we should have built a bunch more. Has Corella mentioned how many Rwandans were returning on the home flight? Yeah, she's interestingly enough, she's kind of avoided that statement, avoided telling us.
Conclude, Mr. Speaker. The British people are famously a fair and patient people. But their sense of
citation fucking needed
fair play has been tested beyond its limits, and they've seen the country taken for a ride. Their patience has run out. The law-abiding patriotic majority have said, enough is enough. This cannot and will not continue. Their government, this government, must act decisively, must act with determination, must act with compassion, must act with proportion. So make no mistake.
The thing is, I think if they'd have framed this shit better, Mark, I think if they'd have been a little bit more optics pilled on this kind of stuff, I don't think they're going to lose votes. Like, this kind of tough immigration policy tends to sell votes, especially at a time in which it's being massively pushed by the right-wing press. But one thing that is at least, you know, one very small thing that I will give the British people is that they tend to be so self-centered that they care far more about their mortgage rate than they do about how racist they are. Like, I think some moderates will think that they're monsters, but a lot of people just think that it's just sensible policy given how the media have hyped up the problem of small boats crossings to make it like the issue du jour, so much that Rishi Sunak included it in his 5 pledges or whatever it was, because they want to push this as being like a genuine massive issue far more than it really is. Make the mountain out of the molehill. But I do think there is definitely some amount of people there who will just go along with this, but they won't vote Conservative because they care more about their mortgage than they do about about the small boats issue. I couldn't possibly comment on that, Jim. I couldn't possibly comment in my official capacity. Keith is kind of pushing the tough on immigration line to where he's never mentioned safe legal routes ever. Like, even at least Jonathan Ashworth mentioned it on Sophie Ridge on Sunday. Keir Starmer, nothing. We get nothing from Sir Keith about safe and legal routes. He just continually says we need to spend even more state money on additional cops because he's top cop, rather than the easy, simple and cheaper policy. From the Greens, the Green Party is the only party taking a strong stand against this cruel legislation and saying proudly that refugees are welcome. So they seem to be better than Labour. You're 100%. I'm probably going to vote Green, so.
This Conservative government, this Conservative Prime Minister will act now to stop the boats, and I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A record 45,000 people.
The President sure is proving an education on life in pre-World War II Europe. Yeah, quite. Worry about immigrants and trans people, not all the poverty we cause, will be the Tory election campaign. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's definitely a good way of keeping their base engaged, right? They'll lose the floating voters, but they'll keep enough of their base engaged to not get wiped out, essentially. Unless Reform UK get even stronger on this stuff if they really haven't solved the problems they're trying to hype up as being like the real issues in this country. Although we're not quite getting to the point at which we've got people getting on stage at conferences asking for trans people to be eradicated just yet at time of recording.
People crossed the channel on dangerous small boats last year, up from just 280 4 years ago. In that short time, the government has allowed criminal gangs to take hold along the channel and along our border. At the same time, convictions of people smugglers have halved. Home Office asylum decisions have collapsed, down 40%. The backlog and costly, inappropriate hotel use has soared. Removals of unsuccessful asylum seekers are down 80% on the last Labour government. And legal family reunion visas for refugees are down 40%. This is deeply damaging chaos. And there is no point in ministers trying to blame anyone else for it. They have been in power for 13 years. The asylum system is broken, and they broke it. We need serious action to stop dangerous boat crossings which are putting lives at risk and undermining border security. And that is why Labour has put forward plans for a cross-border police unit, for fast-track decisions and returns, to clear the backlog and end hotel use, and a new agreement with France and other countries.
Yeah, again, just more cops. That's all it is. The only solution is more cops.
But instead, today's statement is Groundhog Day. The Home Secretary has said anyone who
Jinxed, JDM.
arrives illegally will be deemed inadmissible and either returned to the country they arrived from or a safe third country. Only that wasn't this Home Secretary. It was the last one. And that wasn't this bill. It was the last one, passed only a year ago, which did not work. And as part of last year's bill, the Home Office considered 18,000 people as inadmissible for the asylum system because they had travelled through safe third countries, but because they had no return agreements in place, just 21 of them were returned. That is 0.1%. The other 99.9% just carried on, often in hotels, at an extra cost of £500 million. And it didn't deter anyone. Even more boats arrived. So what is different this time? They still don't have any return agreements in place. The Home Secretary herself has admitted Rwanda is failing, and even if it gets going, it will only take a few hundred people. So what will happen to the other 90?
How about the fact that the Rwanda policy is obscene? Like, there are a bunch of stuff here that is correct, and she's correct to bring it up. And yet, literally, as we've seen from what I've said and what people are saying in chat, the only solution that she's provided to this is just fucking more cops, right? And then the criticism that she has is that it's inefficient and there aren't enough cops. I hate this stuff. I hate our politicians. This is like, when will she talk about the safe and legal routes? When? When will she do it?
99% of people under this bill. Now, she says she's going to detain them all, maybe for 28 days. She could tell us how many detention centres they will need and how much that will cost. But even if she does, what will happen when people leave?
Or the fact that the detention centres are fucking concentration camps. We've looked at Manston. It's the exact same shit that was on the US-Mexico border during the Trump era. It's obscene, and the fact that would you like to tell me how financially efficient your concentration camps are going to be? I'm losing my mind. Labour trying to out-authoritarian the Tories again. Kel Surprise, yeah, quite.
28-day detention. Will she make people destitute, so they just wander the streets in total chaos? Torture victims, Afghan interpreters.
Obviously, yeah, the camps are still there in Texas. Although I will be, and they've still not ended. What is it, Title 42 as well, on the US-Mexico border. Because safe and legal routes is the only way of being able to do this, right? Because as I don't know if you were there in chat before, DeWolfie, but I mentioned, you can have safe and legal routes for people to get here, and then you can hear their asylum claims, right? And then if they fail their asylum claims, then you can go through the removals process. But the whole point about stopping the boats and ending the criminal gangs is because the reason why the criminal gangs have a business model is because there is no other route for people to get here. So they are forced into the hands of these gangs to be able to make the journey in the first place. You kill the business model of the gangs by having the safe and legal routes. You get them they take the legal routes into the country. They go through the asylum process. If they fail the asylum process, they get deported. It's not a difficult process. But the whole reason why we're in this mess is because people can't even get here to make the asylum claims so that we know whether or not they're legitimate or not. And they're sitting around in concentration camps whilst we can't even hear their asylum claims, which is literally what was happening on the US-Mexico border. People were being put in the concentration camps before their ability to even actually have their asylum claims heard.
Families with children. Or will she put them into indefinite taxpayer-funded accommodation? Never returned anywhere because they don't have the agreements with Europe in place, neither returned nor given sanctuary, never having their case resolved. Just forever.
And also, the Labour Party aren't going to mention the issues with regards to Brexit either, and, being removed from a bunch of those agreements that were, and, the conventions we would have from being within the European Union. She can't mention that because Labour are taking this explicit position where they refuse to criticise any part of Brexit, right? Like, again, I am someone who's pretty ambivalent as far as the Brexit issue is concerned. I see the good things about the European Union, I see the bad things about the European Union, but I'm willing to, regardless of my own position, understand that there should be some discussion about the ramifications of our decision to leave and our decision to not have good deals in place to deal with this kind of stuff on the back end, right? They remove safe and legal routes to proclaim everyone as illegal, thereby making it easier to pitch this disgusting narrative against immigrants. Yeah, give them legal route, then process it faster. 100%, exactly, 100%, right? That the illegal routes are the primary reason why we have the business model for the criminal gangs. It's sad that Labour and Conservatives still have high polling. Would nice to be if the Greens got more points to push away from this current line. It's so sad because, 60% of the public surveyed said they wanted a party to challenge Labour and the Tories, yet there are loads of other parties available for them to support, and then they refuse to fucking support them. You're right, Edward, how you doing? This is the same as privatising public services, right? Destroy the service so it doesn't work, then flog it for in-personal gain. 100% JDM, 100%.
Asylum accommodation and hotels. She may not call it the asylum system, but thousands more people are still going to be in it nevertheless. And what does it mean for the promises that we made to the Afghan interpreters who served our country, but who were too late to make the last flight out of Kabul as the tyranny was closing in on them? Shameful. The government told them to flee and find another way here, and they told us to tell people that as well. But the resettlement scheme isn't helping them, and if they arrive in this country, finally, this afternoon, perhaps by travelling through Ireland to get here, they will only ever be illegal in the eyes of the government who relied on the sacrifices they made for us. So if the government was serious, it would be working internationally to get a proper new agreement in place with France and Europe, including return agreements, and properly controlled and managed legal routes such as family reunion and reform of resettlement. Instead, this bill makes...
Okay, so they've mentioned safe and legal routes, but only in the realms of, like, family resettlement, rather than just there being an ability to be able to apply for the asylum visa when you're outside, going from loads of different countries, right? Like, she's mentioned legal routes in, like, the most kind of like, hands-off way possible. So, I mean, very, very minor points given to Yvette Cooper for mentioning the actual real solution. There are special fast-track visas specifically for preferable, quote-unquote, white people countries. Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, if you're brown, you basically have to navigate impossible paperwork that only an expensive lawyer can read. Yep, 100%. France are happy for us to process asylum claims there. Tories refuse to do it. This is a crisis of their own engineering. Yeah, exactly, 100%. Yeah, literally, if Rishi Sunak had Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary, they'd be able to do all the deportations that they'd like because she's fucking all over that shit. She bounced nicely off the safe and legal route so she could land squarely in the more cops target. True. True.
Makes this harder, unilaterally choosing to decide no asylum cases at all, but expecting every other country to carry on. And they would work with Labour on our plan for a major new cross-border police unit to go after the criminal gangs. But instead, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party said yesterday we shouldn't go after the gangs because, well, they've existed for thousands of years. That is the disgraceful Tory attitude that's let the gangs off the hook and letting the gangs take hold. And one smuggler told Sky News yesterday that 3/4 of the smugglers live in Britain, yet barely any of them are being prosecuted, and they still haven't found the hundreds of children missing from asylum hotels who've been picked up by criminal gangs. They could be setting out a serious plan today, and we would work with them on it, and so would everyone across the country. Instead, it's just more chaos. They say...
I mean, the statement from Yvette Cooper is better than what I expected, but then again, my expectations were literally in the fucking ground.
No ifs, no buts, but all of us know they're going to spend the whole of the next year iffing and butting and looking for someone else to blame. When it all goes wrong. Enough is enough. We can't afford any more of this slogans and not solutions, just government by gimmick, ramping up the rhetoric on refugees but picking fights simply to have someone else to blame when things go wrong. This bill isn't a solution. It is a con that risks making the chaos worse. Britain deserves better than this chaos. Britain is better than this.
Again, there's so many things that just needed to get mentioned and that they didn't in that statement there. But, you know, like, there was, yeah, again, it's better than nothing as far as a response goes. because she did point out that the fact that we are slow in processing asylum claims is what's leading to the high expenses for people being housed in hotels and within detention centres, whatever it is. But then again, after that, she said, well, hang a minute, maybe we should build more detention centres. I'm like, no, we just fund the asylum claims, please. Is Cooper more along the Theresa May line, still for deportation, but with a more professional face? I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's clear that she's trying to hold her cards close to her chest on what she would deem as being sufficient grounds for deportation. Insofar as one of the actual parts of the bill that Suella Braverman just mentioned there was the fact that they were going to raise the bar for not being deported way higher than it otherwise would have been, whilst also closing all the stuff around modern slavery. And Yvette Cooper had no response to this. Probably, I mean, I'd like to think it would be because Yvette Cooper does think that the bar shouldn't be stupidly high just for rhetorical reasons. But probably more likely is the fact that she wants to, she does agree, but hey ho. Feel sorry for those actually searching for the missing asylum children. Clearly must be tough working against the government while trying to do the right thing. I mean, that basically every single government department is at war with the government.
A communist.
Landphobe with the follow. That's an excellent Twitch name. Welcome to No Justice stream. I hope you're doing well. Remember, one of the big stories I remember was from the Cameron years. People who were working in job centres, for example, who during the Labour years saw their job as their role as a noble one, trying to get people who were down on their luck back into work to be able to have something they can contribute to society, make some money, get themselves back on their feet, and they found it very rewarding. And as soon as the Tories came in and they had sanctioned targets and all that kind of stuff, and instead of trying to help people into work, it became a punishment for not being in work. And they actually started hating their jobs, and it became completely fucking miserable. That's what that kind of stuff reminds me of, Danny Marco.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for her remarks, but forgive me, after 5 minutes of hysteria, histrionics and criticism, I'm still not clear. I've just got no idea what Labour's plan is. I'll assume the Shadow Home Secretary is still committed to scrapping our Rwanda partnership, as she said last year. I'll assume that the Leader of the Opposition still wants to close immigration removal centres, as he promised during his leadership campaign. Shadow Home Secretary talks about safe and legal routes. I wonder what number they would cap that at. 500,000? A million? 5 million? She should be honest with this House and with the...
The routes don't have any bearing on the amount of people. It's just how they get there. What you're having a discussion about there, Suella, is the realms with which that you would accept somebody for asylum. This is two different conversations. Oh, Rishi's going to stand at his lectern. Oh, what's going on? Oh. Oh dear fucking Lord. It's so obvious. It's the gigantic grift. It's such a gigantic fucking grift.
The British people. What she really means is unlimited safe and legal routes. Open borders by the back door.
Safe and legal routes are not open borders. It's the way to get to the country to then be able to make the asylum claim that then gets judged legitimate or illegitimate. The reason why the boats are happening is because they can't get to the UK to make the fucking asylum claim in the first place. This is your job, Suella. The only reason why the Tories are really good at stating that Labour don't have a plan is because they know their plan sucks.
She says get serious. Well, let's look at the facts, Mr. Speaker. The British people want to stop the boats. It's one of the 5 promises that the Prime Minister made to the British people. But stop the boats didn't even feature in the Leader of the Opposition's 5 big missions.
Yeah, because it's not a big problem. It's an astroturfed problem that isn't as massive as you think that it is, right? I think most people... most people, and if they don't, then they should be far more concerned with the cost of living crisis, being able to put food on their kids' table, than whether or not there's people in boats on the south coast. Like, I literally maybe I'm just in my North London tofu eating the liberal wokerati friend groups or whatever it is. But I'm far more concerned about whether or not I can put fucking food on the plate and turn on the heating than I care about the boats.
It's because he probably doesn't care, or is it because he doesn't care, or because he doesn't know what to do? We all know why, and I think the British people know why. It's because deep down, the leader of the opposition doesn't want to stop the boats. He thinks it's bigoted to say that we've got too much illegal migration abusing our system. It's because Labour MPs would prefer to write...
Would he be wrong?
letters stopping the removal of foreign national offenders. It's because the Labour Party would prefer...
When did he say that?
...to vote against our measures to penalise foreign national offenders, to streamline our asylum system. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. Labour are against deterring people who would come here illegally. They are against...
It's true, yeah, exactly. And, you know, they're as long as they're Ukrainians, it's all good. As long as they're Ukrainians, it's fine. I wonder why that might be. So great to see Brown MPs delivering far-right policies. Progress. Yeah, exactly.
Detaining people who do come here illegally, and they are against deporting people who are here illegally. That means, Mr. Speaker, that they are for this situation getting worse and worse. Perhaps that's fine. Perhaps that's fine. Perhaps that's fine for the leader of the opposition and most of the Labour front bench, but it's not their schools, it's not their GPs, it's not for their public services, housing and hotels filling up with illegal migrants. Perhaps that's why...
The reason why the hotel's filling up with migrants is because you've not properly funded the asylum service. That's the problem.
Even before seeing this bill and engaging on the substance, Labour has already said that it wouldn't support its passage through Parliament. Is the leader of the opposition...
And yeah, exactly. Why are the people illegal? They're illegal because you've decided that they're illegal. You can literally, you know, okay. It's just like, we think that, you know, people, you know, we think people with blonde hair should be banned from entering in the UK and be made illegal. And it's like, oh, okay, well, actually, no, I think that's bad. So you support illegal immigration, do you?
Committing that the Labour Lords will block it. The British people want to stop the boats. The Conservative government has a plan to stop the boats. This Prime Minister will stop the boats. And if the people want closed minds and open borders, then they can rely on Labour.
Walton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Never have I heard such fabricated rage against genuine attempts to come up with practical solutions for this problem from a party opposite that has consistently been a policy vacuum on any practical solutions at all. So I support this bill, and particularly the provisions for sustainable, safe and legal routes for genuine asylum seekers.
I mean, well, we all know how people genuinely feel about refugees. Remember that kid that fucking, like, I hate to say it on, and she, like, channel gets struck for this, but remember the dead child whose body washed up on the shores of the UK? People just didn't care. People just didn't fucking care, right? Katie Hopkins calling people cockroaches to fucking die in the Mediterranean. They don't give a shit. They're happy they see they do not care about seeing these people die. There you go, blaming economic woes due to austerity and capitalism on refugees. Well, exactly, you know, fascism is always capitalism in decay, as usual, and they will happily, you know, retreat to social issues when the economic issues fail. 3-word slogans always work, yeah, get Brexit done, you know, whatever. Absolutely right, Belvoir.
Can I specifically ask the Home Secretary on the Rwanda scheme? When the Home Affairs Select Committee visited Calais recently, we were told that when the Rwanda scheme was announced, there was a big upsurge in migrants in France approaching the authorities, asking about staying in France, because there was a deterrent factor. It hasn't happened because the Rwanda scheme has not got off the ground. So when she sees her counterparts in France on Friday, can we suggest that the French might like to join us in a joint Rwanda-type scheme, because they face the same problems, and can they do more? Now, we do have safe and legal routes to stop people getting in the boats, arrest them, and stop this illegal trade at source on their side of the channel.
My right honourable friend is absolutely correct. Deterrence is the key theme running through these measures. We want to send the message loudly and clearly to those people smugglers, to those people thinking about crossing the channel. Do not do it. Do not hand over your life savings. Do not get into that flimsy dinghy. Do not risk your life, because you will not be entitled to a life.
Yes, true. People just risk their life in the flimsy dinghy in the channel to get the hands of people smugglers, just for the fucking jollies of it, right? You know, there's no other possible reason why they would do it other than just do it. Actually, fucking might as well, guys. Might as well journey across the channel, and risk death and criminality. There's no other possible reason they could do it. And definitely, the potential free trip to Rwanda is the only thing that could possibly stop them. I wonder if there's any studies on deterrence that would show how effective it is. I wonder if all those studies show deterrence is wholly ineffective. I mean, but this Tory MP thinks that there's been an uptick in people asking about staying in France. So clearly all of your studies and your facts are pretty much misplaced. Must be for our very generous benefit system. Yeah, quite. Insurrection is the only answer to change this crazy system. No comment. Something in Minecraft, Pedro.
The UK.
SNP spokesperson Stuart C. MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the SNP stands proudly behind the Refugee Convention and the European Convention on Human Rights.
Well, that's true. At no point during Yvette Cooper's speech did she mention at all that this is breaking international law. You'd thought that would have been something fucking important. The whole breaking international law that Suella Braverman is doing. But no, Labour aren't bothered about international law, are they?
I believe that all who seek asylum and seek refugee status deserve a fair hearing, and we are 100% behind the clear statement from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees that there is no such thing as an illegal asylum seeker. Mr. Speaker, despite the dreary dog whistle rhetoric, her bill will not so much as lay a solitary finger on people smugglers or people traffickers, but it will cause serious and devastating harm for people who have already endured incredible suffering. Afghans let down by the government.
I would also like to point out, if anyone in the comments watching the stream VOD later on says, but you wanted people to make normative claims rather than descriptive claims, and I have made plenty of normative claims throughout this entire stream, but I will also on top of that make the descriptive claim that this is also breaking international law and breaking the Refugee Convention that the UK helped write. Law that binds, not protects, etc, etc, sigh, yeah, 100%, every time.
Utterly failed relocation schemes will be locked up and offshored. People who have fled persecution in Syria, Eritrea or Iran will remain blocked from the asylum system. The policies that have seen hundreds of children go missing from hotels will be enshrined in her bill. The world-leading modern slavery legislation piloted through by her predecessor is about to be ripped to pieces without a single shred of justification. Mr. Speaker, that is what her appalling bill looks set to deliver, and that is why we will oppose it every step of the way. Mr. Speaker, if every country followed her example, the whole system of refugee protection around the world would fall to pieces. But it's not just the system of refugee protection around the world that's going to be trashed by this bill, but the UK's reputation as a place of sanctuary. Mr. Speaker, she spoke about an overwhelmed asylum system. The only thing that has overwhelmed the asylum system is the Conservative Party's incompetence and mismanagement. Ugly, likely to be counterproductive and of doubtful legality. That's how one of her own ministerial colleagues described the Rwanda plan, and that also beautifully encapsulates what's in her bill. So, Mr. Speaker, two questions for the Home Secretary. What happens then if an Afghan arrival cannot be removed to Afghanistan, France, Rwanda or anywhere else? Will he or she eventually be admitted to the asylum system, and if so, after how long? And finally, Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister meets with President Macron, will he be telling the President that the UK is prepared to leave the European Convention on Human Rights?
The question I really want to... I assume the question will come. It's just to be literally just like, someone is fleeing the war in Yemen. How do they how do they get to the UK to be able to claim asylum? Simple. Or how do they claim refugee status in the UK? Fleeing the war, fleeing the worst humanitarian crisis in the world in Yemen. How would they do it? Asylum seekers can't even receive benefits in the UK. Legacy media never point out. So true every time, right? That they obviously don't. They absolutely do not receive benefits. But barely the fact that we're paying for the hotels in the first place is apparently too much as far as people are concerned. Is basic accommodation. Well, it does show us, right? Again, it's always the same people who will literally spend the entire time saying that, oh, it's if we can house asylum seekers in hotels, why are we still having homeless people on our streets? Why are we not protecting our own first? And yet, when there's not these kind of things in place, they're the ones who are saying that homeless people are absolute threats and dangers in our cities, and their tent city should be fucking taken down. Right? People with essentially zero principles whatsoever. Hence, as JDM pointed out correctly in chat, law that binds does not protect, etc. Same shit, different day, different story. Yvette Cooper did mention the missing children in her speech, yeah. Oh, that's fine.
Mr. Speaker, a lot of passion, a lot of fury and a lot of fire. I would only wish that the Scottish Government would bring so much passion to their approach to accommodating asylum seekers when Scotland currently takes one of the lowest numbers of asylum seekers out of our United Kingdom. Our measures set out a comprehensive and coherent plan combining fairness and compassion.
The fairness and compassion of literally making everybody illegal? What the fuck? How can you possibly describe that in that way? That's completely nonsensical.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, if anything, it's so incredibly fair. It's so incredibly fair that people in Hong Kong can get here, despite the fact that obviously things aren't great in Hong Kong, but they're nowhere near as bad as they are in, say, for example, Yemen. But because they're people who are fleeing the bad man in the form of Xi Jinping, and not the good man in the form of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, suddenly we have a completely different set of legalities as far as people fleeing those different conflicts. It's almost like, right? It's almost like we don't want to admit that there's a humanitarian crisis in Yemen because our state benefits financially from selling weapons to the Saudi government to cause the fucking humanitarian crisis in Yemen, because our country is run by genuinely the fucking worst people on the planet.
Now then, when asked by a reporter if foreign rapists and murderers should be deported to the country where they came from, the lawyer of the opposition replied, "It depends." Well, I say get rid. So does the Home Secretary. Can she confirm that this bill will indeed get rid of foreign rapists and murderers?
Home Secretary.
Well, he's right to point out the...
Well, the thing is, that you're absolutely right, Mario End, in the swell of proof preference. It's actually proof that immigrants to the UK can perfectly assimilate over a couple of generations. But as far as she is concerned, the only reason she assimilates is because she's part of the in-group, right? She sees herself as being the exception rather than the rule, because she got accepted into the in-group, into the inner ring, into the upper echelons of society, being part of the inner ring of as far as governance and the ruling class is concerned. And so she sees herself as being the special exemption rather than the rule, rather than being, analogous to the plenty of other immigrants who come to the UK who by and large do accept UK cultural values. Funny how liberals who hate Anderson forget he's historically a Blairite. I mean, how different is Lee Anderson rhetorically from someone like David Blunkett? I mean, they're identical on refugee issues, they're identical on trans issues. And Lee Anderson isn't even fucking Northern. He's from the Midlands. I mean, Lee Anderson is, I mentioned in the segment that I did on him, is literally just like the Turning Point Greg's meme, like classist stereotype used by both sides. Like liberals will use it in a derogatory sense, and conservatives will use it as kind of like the benevolent, from like a benevolent classist standpoint, right? They will use him as we believe that all working class people are a Turning Point Greg's meme, so we're going to create an artificial Turning Point Greg's meme and promote him to be deputy chair of the Conservative Party to try and pander to what we believe this caricature of the working class really is. Blunkett is even more homophobic. I mean, probably. Hey Lee, if you hate rapists so much, why didn't you report Chris Pincher to the police? True. Again, we don't seem to be taking the same kind of line with rapists on our own shores, do we? Or white rapists. They're never a problem, are they? Is Anderson an idiot or a shill? Both, probably.
Shameless position that the Labour Party has adopted, frankly. We have passed measures to make it easier to remove foreign national rapists, drug dealers, murderers. What does the Labour Party do? They write letters...
No, not the drug dealers. Fucking hell, they're powering the economy. Again, another instance of something that is only being seen as being bad because it's already illegal, and therefore people are conflating illegality with immorality. When, I think that drugs are fucking based. Fucking love. I don't even take drugs. I have had one toke of a single special cigarette in the entirety of my existence, as a human being. Right. That is it. That is the only thing I've ever done. Never done any other drugs whatsoever. And I think that legalizing them is great. I think people should have access to recreational drugs that are regulated and so they can't be cut with other things, and they should be treated. Addiction should be treated as a medical issue. And fuck hell, if you really genuinely are so economically concerned, legalize drugs, right? And let's boost the economy as being the legal drug capital of Europe. But in a post-Brexit world, let's fucking go. Anderson was hounded out by the hard left under Corbyn, common Corbyn W. It's amusing how all of the hashtag FBE types who piss blood over Lee Anderson's, legitimately abhorrent views, will refuse to acknowledge the fact that the only reason why he's in the Tories at the moment is because he was too right wing for Jeremy Corbyn. Based, 100% based. Next, I'll be saying I follow the
to stop us.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Diana Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, in the Home Affairs Select Committee report,